Hello and welcome to Sex in the News. We are the Siegel Brothers. Tonight we're bringing you a couple of stories. One here at home in Florida. Our governor is removing LGBTQ inclusive anti-bullying info from the state's website. Interesting study looking at sex ratio at birth being linked to several environmental pollutants. And Harvey Weinstein's alleged sexual dysfunction defense fails to convince a judge to overturn his indictment. Welcome back, my brother.
Welcome back to you.
Welcome to Sex in the News.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us.
Good pieces this week.
Yeah, always got to find something interesting going on here.
Unfortunately, sex and politics continues to be an ongoing theme, and we Floridians generally do not take a whole lot of pride in our governor, Ron DeSantis. But
Smart ones, at least.
Yeah, at least he's consistent, right?
Yeah.
Our governor has removed LGBTQ inclusive anti-bullying info from the state of Florida's Department of Education website.
Because I think there was I think it was spurred by some Tallahassee little local newspaper, right? I think it's the Capital Star. I've never read it. Really don't intend to. But they basically were saying, hey, wait a minute. There's information on the Department of Education's website about gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual kids.
About
and
bullying,
we can't have that.
Right?
And they're getting bullied. Right?
Yeah.
So we can't have that. We can't stop these kids from being bullied. These kids should be bullied. That's go to the mentality.
We don't want our kids getting information that it's okay to be gay. That's the classic defense.
Right. Which, now again, let's put those together. Right? Information that says don't bully kids automatically means it's okay to be gay. Like, first of all, anybody has a choice.
Right.
That's just the overriding stupidity.
A long-standing objection to sex ed in general, but sex ed that mentions that not everyone is heterosexual and will be married and have children in a heterosexual marriage. Like, really?
Right.
That's the disgust in it.
Yeah, it really is. And again, the constant punishing children, the harm that's done directly to them, and the harm that it opens them up to because of this nonsense. Right? And, I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I will say something positive about DeSantis, about our governor, and say that he is, when you break everything down, put everything else aside, he is a fairly intelligent person, yet for a fairly intelligent person, he is a freaking moron. Right? His level of stupidity, right? Although, you know what? I don't think I can call it stupidity. Right? I would probably have to call it something more like evil, because I think he does know what he's doing. He is very aware. I think a lot of this stuff he doesn't really believe, but like most of these conservative politicians, they are pandering to a psychotic base.
Absolutely.
Right? This rabid underbelly of the Republican Party that's now defining it is really their bread and butter. Right? And all they're doing is playing to their audience, right? No matter who they hurt. Right? And in this case, we're talking about hurting kids. Right? So, this removing the information about bullying and preventing bullying of otherwise marginalized kids, there's really no defense for that.
Yeah, and unless you are tacitly approving of discrimination against those people.
Well, yeah, but I think this is beyond tacitly. I think this is overt approval, right? Saying, you know what, it's okay. These kids can be targets. All right, so, yeah.
Well, our next piece is for really for the science geeks and statistics nerds. Sex ratios at birth linked to pollutants Now, we've talked a lot over the years about scary kind of environmental findings, especially in animals.
Yep.
Where, the fact that hundreds of millions of women have been flushing the metabolites of birth control pills in their urine down the toilets for the past 50 plus years, and that's had an environmental impact. Remember, there was a story from the journal Nature that they found a species of frogs where they were like 85% female, and of course that would typically spell doom for a species. This seems to be one of the first long-term, large long-term studies of people. And they looked at thousands of statistics comparing the United States and Sweden to look for potential collaborations between specific pollutants in the environment and the proportions of male and female babies born. And they had some rather interesting findings, right?
Yeah.
Some pollutants like aluminum and chromium and mercury associated with a higher proportion of male babies. Lead in the environment was linked to the opposite correlation, a higher level of female babies being born. This was fascinating. They even found that at events that occur, like
stressful events,
hurricanes or shootings, also had an impact on the sex ratio of babies being born.
Right. Now, what I find interesting about that is, and they were looking at sort of similar time periods after Hurricane Katrina and after one of the big school shootings that we had that Virginia Tech shooting. And what they found was after Hurricane Katrina, there really wasn't any change in that sex ratio. In other words, it was still that comparable percentage of boy babies, girl babies that were born. But 34 weeks after the Virginia Tech shooting, they found something pretty interesting, right? That it did have an impact on the sex ratio. And basically, they found that after that event, there were higher percentage of female babies that were born. And that's fascinating on a lot of different levels, not the least of which is I think it also speaks to the fact that the way we sort of respond to natural disasters is different than the way we respond to these kinds of I'll just call them man-made disasters, these kinds of sort of human-related, human-created type of events. The stress that is related to that, we already have a lot of information about what stress response, intense stress response, and chronic stress response can do to the body.
Right. It's just interesting to wonder what the implications of these findings are. That is it a kind of a defense? Is it a biological, kind of an evolutionary selection thing that depending on certain stressors in the body, whether from chemical pollutants or events? There's long been lots of theories about hormonal interaction between a woman's body and a baby growing in it. Different genetic factors with boy babies and girl babies.
That's what I would like to really look at as well. That to me that's a question I have about this because, we know that the sex of a child is not determined by genetics. The genetics give us potential, right? So there's something else. There are other hormonal events that have to happen, right? Like, for example, to be male, starting out with the genetics, the XY chromosomes, that does not make us male, right? At some point in our development, at 8 weeks, there's, I'll just call it like a shower of testosterone that comes over that embryo. It's the very end of the embryonic period.
Is what makes that event happen.
No, it happens anyway. What the Y chromosome does is allow that testosterone wash to stick. Right? For lack of a better term, to stick. So what happens is when it sticks to that XY embryo, what happens is now a new chemical event where it now produces embryos, hormones that specifically prevent feminine development. right? Right? For a long time, we used to think that we're male by default, that nature defaults to male, but it doesn't.
No,
it defaults to female. We had to do something to become male. So as XY embryos, that sort of testosterone had to stick to us. We had to make that anti-female hormone, and that's why we became male. So now I'm very curious to see if this increase in female births is a corresponding genetic difference. Are these XX people, or are we seeing what a lot of people don't even realize, are these XY females? Could it be affecting not the genetics, but the hormonal activity that really creates sex?
Well, we know a lot of environmental pollutants have hormonal effects.
That's right. That's right.
So this, hopefully this will lead to a lot more.
Right. And by the way, not just a lot of environmental pollutants, but a lot of your household products, right? Your cleaning products, your Fabuloso, and all those kinds of things. Endocrine disruptors.
Yeah, this is not a good trend we're on with putting more and more chemicals on our clothes to smell so that scents last longer and longer. These are next to our skin, folks.
Yeah, we
and
absorb.
what we wash them in gets into our bodies.
Yeah.
And we really should think twice.
So
Do we want to smell like fresh laundry for 3 months after clothes were washed and worry about disrupting our endocrine systems? Or should...
Right.
Yeah,
or
we
just
should
wash your
bathe a
clothes
little more
frequently.
Okay.
So that, I think that's pretty interesting, and it sort of kind of raises a lot of pretty important questions.
It does.
this
No
is
questions
an
here at
interesting
our
one.
last story on the Harvey Weinstein trial that has still been going on. Remember, he's been charged with almost a dozen rape and sexual assault charges.
Yeah.
And now his defense has been trying to use a inability to perform certain sexual functions as a defense for why he was not capable of being guilty of these crimes, because he had sexual dysfunction.
Right. So basically, it's an interesting strategy. I
Right.
couldn't have raped her because I can't get an erection.
Yeah.
Right? I have erectile dysfunction. So how could I have been a rapist? And all of this was based on a nurse that examined him, I think in 2018.
Yeah, a forensic nurse, not a sex therapist, a forensic nurse.
Right? Who examined him in 2018, but the judge wasn't buying it.
Well, I mean, the judge said this forensic nurse examined him in 2018. The assaults happened between 2004 and 2013. So what if you can't get a boner in 2018?
Right.
The judge said we have an obligation to the grand jury to correct things that we know to be false. I'm sorry, that was the attorney.
There's the attorney, yeah. Right. So, sorry, Harvey, you're
Yeah.
going down.
You're a piece of shit. You're going to spend your life in jail.
Yep, exactly. So, the ED defense did not work.
Right.
You're a rapist. All right, and as we do like to finish the show, one of our favorite pieces is something where we like to honor, if you will, and I use that in quotes. Really, we like to call out hypocrisy, right?
Yes.
Especially as it relates to sex and sexuality. And there's no shortage of sexual hypocrites. Right? And what do we call this
Well,
segment?
this is what we like to call poetic justice.
Indeed.
And our honoree for this week's Poetic Justice is none other than daytime TV's Dr. Oz, who's already had a reputation for a long time as a piece of shit for shilling, for selling questionable products,
That's
for
right.
hawking dubious medical treatments and pushing false claims.
Yeah, just giving bad medical advice.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a schmuck, plain and simple.
And now that he's giving up the easiest gig in the history of medicine to run for the Senate in the state of Pennsylvania, even though he lives in New Jersey.
So
He's done a little flip-flopping.
yes, he has. He had, which is unusual for a Republican candidate.
Well, I mean, there was a time when Republicans used that as a criticism of people like John Kerry that said, you know, because he evolved and grew as an intelligent thinking human being and changed his opinion on certain things, that was evidence that he couldn't stick to his guns, and flip-flopper was a bad thing. But in this case, Dr. Mehmet Oz, who's long been an advocate for women's rights and a pro-choice position.
Yeah, abortion rights in particular.
Now that he decided to run for office as a Republican, all of a sudden, he's anti-choice.
Right. Right. Now, 2 years ago, he gave a really long interview about how important women's reproductive rights were. How, you know, not telling women what they can do with their body. About life, it does not begin at conception. And basically, everything that he was saying has been reversed. Right? And now, all of a sudden, abortion is a terrible thing.
Well, like you said, about pandering to that base.
Yeah.
Right? And making sure you get those votes.
Right? So, you know, he went from, by denying women the right to terminate a pregnancy and have that agency or control over their reproductive fate, to basically, screw you, you don't have a choice over your own body. And elect me, and I will make sure I pass laws that will codify that, right? And truly prevent you from having any kind of control over your body.
We're in trouble.
And this is a doctor. This is a medical doctor. Well, on paper.
Yeah.
On paper. So for being an even bigger schmuck than we've ever given you credit for being such a flip-flopper, and a hypocrite above all else, we give you our traditional poetic justice salute.
That'll do it for this week's Sex in the News. We are the Siegel Brothers.